The budget reconciliation bill specifically around SNAP includes a number of different cuts to the program. These are some of the biggest cuts that have ever been made to SNAP in the program's history. Some of those cuts will impact community members pretty quickly.
This is Hourglass, the podcast for United Way of King County in Seattle. Coming up, a conversation about federal legislation that will cut SNAP benefits to recipients across Washington state and nationwide. We sat down with Sara Seelmeyer, United Way's Director for Ending Hunger, and Connor Walsh, United Way Associate Director for Public and Private Partnerships, both of whom recently attended a United Way Worldwide Advocacy Day in Washington, D.C., to speak with members of Congress about the potential impact of those SNAP cuts. We'll also discuss our free summer meals program for school-aged children and a local volunteer opportunity. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for tuning in. It was just 3 years ago that grocery prices nationally during the COVID-19 pandemic rose to their highest levels in nearly 4 decades. According to the University of Washington data, King County residents in 2022 spent on average almost $300 a month per person on groceries, the 6th highest average among counties in the nation. Food prices dipped somewhat after 2022, but this year they're already more expensive than they were last year, due in large part to increases in the prices of eggs, beef, chicken, and non-alcoholic beverages. As grocery prices have surged, we at United Way of King County have heard stories of local families struggling to make ends meet, making hard choices about whether to pay the light bill or put a full meal on the table. During 2022, our county saw significant increases in food insecurity, which means that residents had difficulty at some time during the year obtaining enough food due to lack of resources. We work to tackle food insecurity with programs like home grocery delivery, breakfast after the bell, and free summer meals. Our advocacy efforts helped expand eligibility for more than 92,000 students statewide to receive free school meals under the USDA's community eligibility provisions. And we're convinced that as challenging as it has been for local families to make ends meet, it would have been far worse had it not been for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, one of our nation's most effective tools for addressing hunger and lifting families out of poverty. SNAP serves an average of 42 million Americans each month. And last year, more than 1.2 million Washingtonians received SNAP benefits, 34% of which were children under 18, 22% of which were seniors. One would think that given the challenges people have faced with rising grocery prices over the past few years, our elected leaders would find ways to increase SNAP benefits, to offer people some relief from the stresses that come with trying to put enough food on the table. Instead, it's just the opposite. This summer's passage of federal H.R. 1 legislation, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, could cut billions of dollars in spending on SNAP. H.R. 1 also narrows eligibility requirements for SNAP benefits, forces more people to work to receive benefits, and directs states to cover more of SNAP's costs. In Washington state, which is currently mired in a budget deficit of at least $12 billion, the impact of such cuts would be disastrous. An increase in the state cost share requirement for SNAP would add $165 million to the Washington state budget. Also, the expansion of work requirements covers adults up to age 65, families with children 14 years or older, veterans, former foster youth, and those experiencing homelessness. These groups would need to work at least 80 hours a month to qualify, and this affects 306,000 Washingtonians. Refugee and asylum seekers, legal residents of the U.S. who have been granted humanitarian protective status, are no longer eligible for SNAP. This impacts 15,000 individuals in Washington. And our research has shown us that aside from being a critical piece of the social safety net, SNAP is an economic engine. Every $1 in SNAP benefits generates $1.54 in economic activity. In 2024 alone, Washingtonians spent $2 billion in SNAP benefits, supporting local grocery stores across the state. In rural communities, SNAP transactions can account for up to 50% of all grocery sales. With grocery prices increasing this year and cuts to programs like Medicaid and student loan forgiveness, we at United Way are seriously concerned that H.R. 1's cuts to SNAP would undermine our residents' access to food. That's why in July, members of our staff traveled to Washington, D.C. for the United Way Worldwide Advocacy Forum and Capitol Hill Day to discuss with Congress ways to protect and strengthen SNAP. United Way of King County joined more than 400 United Way professionals from all 50 states and Puerto Rico to share strategies and discuss strengthening our communities back home. Hourglass recently sat down with 2 United Way staff members who attended the advocacy forum. Sara Seelmeyer, United Way's Director for Ending Hunger, and Connor Walsh, United Way Associate Director for Public and Private Partnerships. We begin with Sara, who said that she initially set out for D.C. to join an advocacy effort against passage of H.R. 1, but things shifted while she was en route.
So I was on my flight out to D.C., knew that this vote might be happening in Congress to pass this bill that included devastating cuts to SNAP and Medicaid and other programs that families rely on. And so I was sitting on my plane looking out the window at, the country 30,000 feet below us. And I started to get so nervous because I was thinking, what if this bill passes while I'm on the plane? I'm not a very patient person. And so I ended up buying the in-flight Wi-Fi just so that I could watch the news tracker as the votes came in. And it was such a surreal experience to be, flying over the country, looking down at where, thousands of people live and know that a group in Congress had just passed this bill that will impact millions of people across the country. And to be on a plane at the time was just a really surreal experience.
And so from there, you reached out to some folks?
Yeah, we were really excited to meet with several of Washington's representatives and senators while we were in D.C. to really share, obviously at that point the bill had passed, but to share the impacts of the bill and our concerns as we move forward, to really make sure that while this bill has passed, we're not missing opportunities to either push back against some of the damage that it will cause or find other opportunities to support community members.
Okay, so Connor, you were there. Can you just tell us what was it like at the advocacy forum? And just for those that might not really understand what goes on in one, just what was that like?
Yeah. I would say it really was a pleasant surprise to be surrounded by 400 other United Way folks all across the country. Mm-hmm. And I think the energy in the room was a little bit deflated. Well, I think going into the advocacy forum, the intention was, that maybe this bill would still be being discussed. And it might be something that would pass later. Well, come to find out, it passes, while Sarah's on the plane on the way over. And there was a pretty quick shift that United Way folks had to make there, right? Mm-hmm. We know that major cuts to SNAP might be coming down the pike. We know about changes to Medicaid, and we know about, how folks are feeling in communities where they're already struggling with access to food. They're struggling with their housing costs. They're concerned about, skyrocketing childcare costs. Mm-hmm. And when you add on this additional kind of layer of cuts, folks really will start to hurt. And I think the energy in the room, a little bit deflated originally, but I think all of us felt really empowered after leaving conversations with colleagues, either from United Way Worldwide or representing, states out of Florida or Ohio or Oregon. We were all there together with a shared vision that we want to continue tackling issues that are driving up poverty in this country and creating headaches for folks that don't need that right now.
So from being in Washington, D.C., then coming back to Washington State, and this is going to happen now. where is it going to be felt first?
Yeah, so the budget reconciliation bill specifically around SNAP includes a number of different cuts to the program. These are some of the biggest cuts that have ever been made to SNAP in the program's history. It's about $186 billion in program cuts. Some of those cuts will impact community members pretty quickly. So the program will have expanded work requirements, requiring folks who are ages 18 through 64 to be working at least 20 hours a week in order to maintain their SNAP benefits. That means that if someone's job hours shift or they need to take time off of work due to an injury, they're at risk of losing those benefits that they rely on. That's a change that will go into effect this fall. And we're expecting that thousands of Washingtonians will be at risk of losing their benefits if they're not able to get connected to work during that time frame. There are also cuts that were made to the program that will shift some of the costs for SNAP to the state. That's something that will go into effect in 2027, but it's something that our state will have to start preparing for now. That money doesn't come from nowhere, right? We, as a state, have a pretty challenging budget outlook right now. And so this means that our state will either have to look at ways of raising revenue or we'll have to look at other programs that can be cut in order to pay for a portion of SNAP so that we can continue this program and continue serving people across our state.
And so from what you've heard from the government side, not only state, but regional and local, what are some of the responses that you've heard people might be pivoting right now?
Yeah, I think people are really thinking about what are the other ways that we can support community members right now. We know that SNAP is the cornerstone of our country's response to hunger and food insecurity, but we also know that there are a lot of other programs that families can rely on. That's everything from the summer meals program that provides meals at over 150 meal sites throughout King County each summer while school is out of session, to local food pantries who provide food to people with very little documentation required or needed. And so our partners, ranging from those local food pantries to city and county governments, are really thinking about how do we bolster all of these other resources so that families who might see lower SNAP benefits are still able to get connected to other resources and keep their pantries full.
And so, Connor, as you do your work in this area, what are you hearing from people? What are you hearing from donors? What are you hearing from people at nonprofits? And how are you sort of taking all that in and how are you responding?
Yeah, I think to start with your first question, hearing from funders and donors, I think the general appetite, so to speak, is around basic needs, right? I think now more than ever, we are seeing rising needs, whether it's access to food, whether it's ensuring that you have a roof over your head. There is a continuing rise there, and funders and donors are pivoting in that direction. And I think we're seeing some promising stuff, right? When there's an emergency that happens, you need to meet that moment. And we're seeing funders like the Medina Foundation and other foundations that have realized now is the time to spend down these dollars, right? The emergency is now. And, we appreciate funders that are going above and beyond to meet that need. And our hope, and I don't think that we would ever be able to fill in the gaps that we might see from federal revenue that used to flow into nonprofits. But the hope is that donors, foundations, corporations see this need and give back more than they had before, because this need will continue to grow. This is just the beginning of these cuts, and they will start to be felt over the course of the next 6 months to a year or two down the line.
Okay. And so now our work also involves advocacy, systems change. And this is something that has already been done. But from a civic engagement perspective, what can people listening to this do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Do you want to take that, Sarah?
Yeah, I think it's really important that people don't stop caring about this. Yes, these cuts happened. Yes, it will be a fight to restore SNAP to what it was 3 months ago, but that's not to say that it's impossible. One of the greatest joys that I have in working in the advocacy space is that things can change. And while we might be taking a step back right now in terms of food access, we certainly will take steps forward as a country as well in the future. And so folks should continue to engage in these issues, should talk about the importance of federal assistance programs like SNAP and Medicaid as they're talking to people in their community. We also will have our state legislative session coming up this winter. And that's a really important opportunity to get involved as well. I think we often think about policy change primarily happening at a federal level, and it's really easy to get discouraged. But there is plenty of change that can happen at this local level, whether it's, testifying at a city council meeting about the importance of food access or other issues to you, or it's engaging in that state legislative process.
Perfect, Connor and Sarah. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Joe. Always a pleasure.
To access free grocery for individuals and families and meals for school children, learn more about No Kid Hungry, a national campaign supported locally by United Way and run by nonprofit Share Our Strength to address hunger and poverty worldwide. Log on to nokidhungry.org. You know what goes hand in hand with summertime? United Way of King County's Summer Meals Program, which provides free, nutritious meals to youth under 18 throughout King County. United Way is proud to partner with the City of Seattle, No Kid Hungry, Hunger Free Washington, and the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction to provide free summer meals and help ease the financial burdens on families this time of year. Free summer meals programs are not hard to find. They're at parks, schools, recreation centers, and other places in your community. For more information about the Free Summer Meals Program, log on to freesummermeals.org. Do you love food and providing nourishment to local communities? The University District Food Bank is looking for volunteers to help serve food to members of its community. If you have just a few hours a week to give, you can make an impact on people's lives. University District Food Bank has volunteer opportunities Monday through Saturday, with some shifts during evening hours. For more information, log on to udistrictfoodbank.org. At United Way of King County, we are working side by side with communities to build an equitable future for everyone. Hourglass United Way is a podcast that highlights how we and our partners spend time making a difference in our communities. Our work is made possible by the generous donations from people like you. Please send comments and suggestions about our podcast to hourglassunitedway@gmail.com. To learn more about our work or to support United Way, log on to uwkc.org. I'm your host, Joe Burris. Thanks for listening. Until next time.